Hello.
Hi, Rebecca. It's Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice. It's Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I want to tell you
Okay.
that this week I became obsessed, I don't know why, with getting a very dark brown t-shirt. Just like a completely simple but beautiful, very dark brown t-shirt. And this is proving difficult.
I was about to say.
Yes. I've got one which I ordered online, which was about £3. So not my usual kind of, don't usually go there. But it was the only one I could find that was a men's one, Fruit of the Loom. And it's okay, but it's not dark enough or gorgeous enough.
And did you also look very high-end? Or you didn't?
I did. I need to continue with the high-end because I feel it's maybe not the right time because it's the sales. But I'm trying to find, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on where I might have a perfect dark brown. I don't know why I want it. I just really know I do.
Yeah, I suspect you're just very avant-garde, and next year...
I truly am,
Yeah, next year everything will be awash with dark brown t-shirts.
Well, I was just thinking it would look amazing in summer.
No, and I
just thought, yes.
I really like brown and blue.
I do.
So...
Well, I'm thinking with my blue eyes, let's go for it.
Yeah. I'm afraid I can't help. I haven't got my first instant thought.
That's all right.
My instant thought was this will be difficult.
Well,
it's a
your
challenge.
Instant thought was correct. It is a challenge. So I've got a temporary hold, in that I have my men's one, which but it's not right. It's not right. It's not what I want. I can see in my head what I want.
It's weird how you think there's so much choice. I always have that when I'm a one handbag person. I just have I don't swap. I just always have one until it wears out, and I always have such trouble finding bags.
Yes,
and even if I was to spend £1,000, there would still not be one I like, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I can always see in my head precisely what I want, and then it's like waiting for that to occur.
Well, in the olden days, I guess with t-shirts that doesn't really work, but that must have been such an advantage if you could afford having stuff made for you.
It really would be good. If I had my local dressmaker and I could go and say, I know a t-shirt is not the most exciting thing, but please make me a beautiful t-shirt.
Yeah. Oh, well, you must tell me.
Keep your eye on.
Yeah, and keep me informed of the progress of your research.
I will. This is now a mission.
Okay.
I need to find it. Okay. So what have you been thinking about?
Well, I've come back yesterday evening from 2 days attending Everyday Fashion Conference. It's called...
Oh, I forgot you were going to that. That's exciting.
It was very exciting. It was called Everyday Fashion, Extraordinary Stories of Ordinary Clothes. And it was...
Lovely.
The first day was in Huddersfield.
And where was it?
Yeah, first was in Huddersfield, and the second was at the University of Leeds. And it was organised by Beth and Bide, who used to be our collaborative PhD student.
Oh, yes, lovely.
And then Jade Halbert and Liz Treganza, who also have finished their PhDs in the not so distant past. And they're all interested in everyday fashion. Yes. So... yeah, it was really, really interesting. I mean, as you can imagine, you can take this in so many directions.
Yes, absolutely.
So it was very diverse. I would say the majority of the talks were sort of 19th and 20th century, not so much early, although some people took it early. And it also was one of these panel conferences, so I couldn't, I didn't attend everything.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you had to make a decision, which is always so hard.
Oh, I don't like that. I like being able to that everyone sees the same thing.
I know, me too. But they apparently had 100 or so submissions. Wow. So I just thought there were sort of some themes that came out quite strongly, and one of the main things was that people kept saying that it isn't paid that much attention to, or hasn't until quite recently. And people were sort of thinking about why that is. We can talk about whether that's true So one thing that came up, so John Stiles, he gave one of the keynotes. He was talking about historians' obsession with innovation, and that they prefer to talk about, when things change or when something develops. But that again also assumes, I've got another helicopter. I don't know what's going on here.
I can't hear it.
Okay.
Is it the police helicopter?
I think so. Or it might be we have a hospital nearby with a helipad, so it might be that. So he was talking about that, which also came up in another talk. Judith Saunders, she's the archivist at Clark's, and I've heard her talk a few times, and her talks are always really interesting because she talks about objects that are not necessarily that prepossessing, and I don't think she would mind me saying that, but she always comes up with really interesting stories attached to them. And she was talking about few samples for 1970s Clark's children's shoes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, shoes were called the Runabout, and they looked quite similar and not that interesting, but then they linked to a sort of very innovative process of doing PVC soles, and it was really interesting. But one thing she mentioned was that Clark's, for instance, often didn't innovate as such, but they were using other people's innovations in an interesting way.
See.
So they would not maybe be the first one to use a particular illustrator for their advertising. So they would use someone who sort of tried and tested, but then they still make it their own in a way. So they're not copying, but they maybe combine a few innovations from other people and make that is their innovation in a way.
That's really nice. And I like that because it really underlines, because as you know, I don't like the trickle-down theory. It drives me crazy. And that is a really brilliant example of why it's not just trickle-down. That it's like, it sounds as though, was she kind of saying, because it sounds like it's sort of adapting newness in relation to your brand and in relation to your customer. So it's not, as you say, it's not just copying. It's a kind of innovation, or but it's adaptation, which is really important.
Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting. So I felt that they were both saying something slightly it was a sort of in a similar vein. And then the other thing that kept coming up was aesthetics. So that some of the objects maybe don't look that spectacular, or some everyday dress. Obviously not all of it, but some of it doesn't look that spectacular, and maybe that is why there hasn't been that much attention, so that the visual is so important. And I thought that was interesting too. And I think with that, you need to look at different areas, like in exhibition. I wondered whether that came from exhibitions recently, haven't been often about the spectacular, but yeah.
Can I just ask you, going back, where is the Clark's archive?
I think it's slightly separated from the actual company. It's called the Alfred Gillett Trust. And I think it's in the west of England, but I should really know about.
Okay. No, that's okay. You had a lot of things to take in.
Yeah.
You can't know everything.
No.
But that's there's a lot of interesting things to say and think about here.
Yeah.
Because firstly, I'm not sure that everyday dress is ignored completely. Because, John Stiles' book on sort of more everyday dress came out at least 10 years ago. And there's Alison's book on everyday dress that's sort of 18th into 19th century. And then there's Rachel's book on W.H. Smith. Marks and Spencer.
Yes. We went to their archive, which is amazing.
Oh, that's fun.
It's amazing. But yeah.
What did you see? Oh, sorry, I'll carry on with
my list. Carry on.
No, I won't carry on. But just, I think there are, or even like my own work.
Yeah.
The American Look is about an idea of everyday dress. It may be not the cheapest everyday dress or every single lady's dress, but it also seems to me that this is about what you perceive as everyday.
Yeah.
Because is it being used as a synonym for like working class? Or is it just because, I don't know, like a divine Chanel dress that costs £3,000 might be someone's everyday dress.
Yeah.
So I think it's really problematic. I don't mean the people speaking were problematic, but it's, as a category, it's problematic because what does it mean? And I mean, there's loads of... sorry, I'm just going in a moment now. Like all the coverage of fast fashion is about everyday dress, and everyday dress as a category in crisis in a way. So I guess, was there like a definition given or definitions of what everyday dress was understood to be?
Not really. And I gave a talk as well, and I thought...
Oh, well, you kept quiet about that, miss. What was that about?
Mine was about potential obstacles for everyday dress making its way into the museum.
Oh,
and it turns out that I'm the obstacle. That was my that was my conclusion. To put it in,
and long may you reign.
Yeah, to put it in a nutshell. But I did think I should start with a definition, and then I chickened out. I looked at Cheryl Buckley and Hazel Clarke's book, and
that's a really good book.
It is. And there is something about everyday, what is sometimes extraordinary sometimes becomes ordinary. So there even a single object can change from being one thing to another. And I'm not sure they have one. Well, they do mention fashion so they call it fashion as a practice of everyday life. But again, I'm not so sure. So I chickened out in the end. I thought I should start with it, but in the end, I didn't ever define what I meant.
It's difficult, but that's kind of what's interesting, that you can say it's not covered as much, but then I think you're right. I mean, I think I think there was a lack probably like 20, 30 years ago of anything other than couture or what the posh ladies wear and court dress. But I think that has radically changed in that period since then. And I think also the kind of the understanding of the differences between categories of dress and categories of people is more complex.
Yes.
And so I think it is difficult to kind of categorize everyday dress because it can mean such different things to different groups of people. So in a way, what anthropologists study, like Sophie Woodward's things, for example, or Danny Miller, they're looking at everyday dress. So I think there's numerous ways it is looked at, but they aren't necessarily saying this is everyday dress. Yeah. It doesn't say everyday dress on the cover, so it's not defined as that, but it is that.
Yeah, there's also someone called Ben Highmore. He writes.
Oh, his work's really interesting on every. Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yeah, no, you're.
But that's interesting because like Ben Highmore's work, I guess I'm not sure when he started writing that, but like everyday studies within cultural studies, I don't even know that cultural studies even really exists as a category anymore because it seems to be swallowed. But that was a sort of hot button topic like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that various people have used like De Soto and people to understand dress in different ways. So it's almost like rather than saying it's not done, it's kind of thinking what are the kind of hidden texts of this field, if you see what I mean. They're like there's all these things that are talking about it but not expressly saying it's the everyday.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think it has a lot to do with the media environment, partly, I think, and what we keep seeing. And when I started to work on my talk, I thought, well, actually, a lot of the time, what I'm doing is in my so-called
is being an obstacle.
Being an obstacle, but also in my so-called career, I dealt a lot of the time with clothes of wealthy people, very wealthy people. Yes. And what we had a lot of media attention recently was clothes of Queen Victoria, the Princess Margaret Dior dress, royal baby shoes. But then the Princess Victoria dress, in a way, is a case in point. It's a morning dress, but it was something she would have worn. It's her everyday dress. So,
That's really fascinating. And I think, do you think, because I think we both in our so-called careers have kind of experienced museums and different museums and galleries being mostly interested in the spectacular in terms of exhibitions.
Yeah, although I think that is quite complex, because it's certain places like the V&A or the Met or the Palais Galliera more recently, also Palais Galliera not like 20 years ago, but then if we go to, Liverpool, or it's also where it's situated, if it's a decorative arts museum.
That's a really important thing, not to be kind of international museum centric and think that's the only voice, and also that those big museums have a completely different remit,
exactly,
in terms of collecting and displaying. And it's like it's there if you look for it, and it's kind of looking for the ways everyday dress is being collected, displayed, written about, photographed, etc. That's why I love documentary photography and amateur film and non-fiction film so much, because you see everyday dress, in inverted commas, and you see how incredibly diverse it is.
Yeah.
And the way that it's influenced by, I mean, obviously I'm looking at sort of 20s, 30s at the moment, so it's influenced by high fashion, by peer groups, by sports people, by Hollywood. So it's not like a pure form. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think it sounds like this was happening at the conference, but I think it can sometimes be viewed in a kind of old school view of subculture way, as though it's this pure, authentic form that's outside fashion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas it's, as with subculture, it's something that's continually evolving and being influenced and influencing.
Exactly. I think that was actually what came out a lot of the conference. So that what a lot of people were saying, that it also changes, that it's not static, that it's not one big thing, but lots of different things going on. So,
because in a way, I think maybe it's more interesting to think about how to apply theories of everyday to different types of dress.
What do you mean?
Well, just like Ben Highmore did. There's a really good collection of everyday theories, and I always give it to my students to look at, and it's really interesting because there's like Goffman talking about backstage and front stage, and that really makes you think about how you prepare yourself and how you dress one way in one context, and that when you're in your house you dress one way, or to see certain groups of people one way, and then you perform, and that can be very complex within one person's very simple limited wardrobe, can even be quite complicated. I think there's like different, do you know what I mean? I think there's like or like Surto, and sort of how you
I also, one of the examples I had were these two dresses of a woman who was a single mother in the 70s, and she always worked as a administrator, usually for local government. So she gave us, she had a lot of workwear suits from the sort of late 70s, and they usually, one was Marks and Spencer. The ones we took in the end was one's Marks and Spencer, one's is Richard shops, which apparently,
like skirt suits.
Yeah, so they're jersey, and they're usually pleated. There's some sort of jersey, woolly jersey, or wool and artificial fibre. And usually it's a pleated skirt with a sort of elasticated waist, and then a same fabric top. One is like a blouse, and the other one is more a bit like a long sleeve T-shirt with a belt. So they're not spectacular at all, but they were both for special occasions. One was for an interview, and she got the job, and one was for a Christmas party. And
what colour?
The one is lilac, one is sort of maroon, so quite 70s sort of colours.
They sound very 70s.
Fabulous. So one is M&S, as I said, and one is Richard Shops. And one thing I was wondering about as well, that I often use clothes as a sort of conduit almost to get to the story of the person. And I was wondering whether that is a good thing to do, but I should maybe also pay more attention to the actual aesthetic qualities of something that might at first glance, don't look so exciting, but it's just a little bit harder, I guess, to, it's easier to talk about some amazing embroidery and the spangles and the rhinestones and whatnot. Yeah. But there's probably enough in those two suits as well, if I just really, spend the time looking at them.
Well, certainly, it's interesting, the choice of colours, which, as you say, links to the period, but also it seems like she's within the purple spectrum.
Yes.
In terms of colours she likes.
Mm.
And just that it sounds like they're interesting because they're suits, but they're also like dresses. So they're kind of a feminine way to negotiate that space, and that they're very appropriate to the spaces she was going into, but also kind of smart enough and an interesting colour enough that they maybe differentiated her. I don't know. No,
I think that's a very good point. And in a way, she is a bit, she probably wouldn't like that comparison, but it is a bit like Margaret Thatcher. One of them has a small frill around the collar, so that it's quite feminine, but otherwise it's sort of very simple. It's just got a few sort of nods to very feminine clothes, but otherwise it also is. The other thing is there are colours that are not shouting, and I think if you think about her role, she was actually dealing with benefit claimants, helping them, and she would sometimes go to their home to help them fill in the forms, and she was meant to be respectable, looking respectable doing that, but also she wasn't the main person in that job.
So they're kind of soft fabrics. It's not like hard tailoring or something.
And they're not shiny. They're dull.
Mm.
So.
And did she tell you what she wore with them? Like what shoes or?
No, I need to try and get in touch with her again. I mentioned that as well. It's quite interesting. Sometimes people are very keen for us to have their clothes because they know it's one way of them being remembered.
Yes.
Well, I assume that's sometimes the reason, but they sometimes still don't want to tell me that much about themselves, which makes things difficult. And she was one of these people, but I remember she said one of the suits, or maybe both, after wearing them for this special occasion, she would wear them either with a white blouse underneath or a cotton polo neck underneath. Yeah, so without, apparently is a bit more special, and then with the white shirt or something else underneath is
that's kind
less
of breaking
special.
Top.
Yeah, so, but I don't know about the shoes. The other thing she gave us was an apricot-coloured toweling play suit.
Fabulous.
For going to rice.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, the belt is wide and it's like a rope. And what I love, the company is called Jersey, and C is spelled like SEA.
Amazing.
Yeah. And she wore that in Ruislip Lido or going to the Isle of Wight.
Fabulous.
But that was for me.
So because that's already two types of everyday that are simultaneously extraordinary and ordinary.
Mm.
Well, that doesn't sound like you were being an obstacle. When did you start? Tell me, Beatrice. When did you start? When did you realise you were an obstacle? When did that start?
It's just I was sitting on these clothes for a little while. I just kept thinking, should we have them? Shouldn't we have them? And a lot of it was that they weren't terribly exciting to look at, and I think that's partly also when I often think of what will they look like on display and what will I say about them when they're on display. And it's also how much chance do I have to get it on display with all the other constraints we are under. So I think that was partly also the thing is I thought often the story needs a lot of explanation, and you can't do that very well sometimes in a gallery where you have only, we always told people don't like to read long captions.
Yeah.
So how do you tell that story? So that was part of the reason as well. It wasn't just me and my personal aesthetic preferences. Although I wanted to make a little bit that point that does come in when people collect.
Oh, I'm sure it does. I don't know how you'd have to really work against it, but then that would be even worse, really.
Or you would have to have very, very prescriptive collection policies that don't give any wiggle room.
But that's not good either.
No, that's not good either. So
can I read you a thing?
Yes.
what you've been saying has been making me think. I'm reading The King of Fashion. You know, the autobiography of Paul Poiret. I'm interviewing it. I don't mean interviewing it. I mean reviewing it.
I thought you were going to interview him.
I'm going to interview him.
Yeah.
Through a psychic.
Yeah.
That would be really fun. But I'm not, in fact. But it made me think what you're saying about there's this little bit that I want to read you.
Yeah.
That he went, early on in his career, he went to work for Maison Worth, which was then run by the two brothers of Charles Frederick Worth, which is Jean and Gaston. And I just like this thing that he said about it. This is what Gaston said when he proposed to Poiret that he come and work with him. He says, "Young man, you know the Maison Worth, which has always dressed the courts of the whole world. It possesses the most exalted and richest clientele, but today this clientele does not dress exclusively in robes of state. Sometimes princesses take the omnibus and go on foot in the streets. My brother Jean has always refused to make a certain order of dresses for which he feels no inclination, simple and practical dresses which nonetheless we are asked for. We are like some great restaurant which would refuse to serve aught but truffles. It is, therefore, necessary for us to create a department for fried potatoes."
That's fantastic.
So, I'm sorry, Coda come and started barking.
Yeah,
he
it's
wants
the mentioning
to make
of
fried
potatoes. Yeah.
Yes, but I like that. So that's another synonym for everyday dress is fried potatoes dress.
And wasn't there a designer who called them the Fords?
Yes.
Who was that?
Yes.
Was that
I think that was actually quite a common thing that was said in the 20s and 30s, because I don't know if Chanel herself said it about her work, but certainly it's been said of it. And then like Elizabeth Hall said when the American designer who worked as a sketcher in Paris in the 20s, said that they were told to draw the Fords, the things that would sell and sell and sell in multiples.
Yeah.
Sorry, the dog next door is going mad, and Coda can't decide whether he should go mad back or just keep his own counsel.
I don't hear that really that much.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Well, Coda can't quite believe whatever this other dog is saying.
Oh.
Yeah.
Probably they're having a little chat about every day.
They are. They're saying,
everyday dog collars.
Think it's every day? I think it's special.
Yeah.
But I like it, and so Poiret goes and makes and develops their fried potatoes department.
Wow.
And makes everyday dresses. And the whole time he's there, Jean is just aghast at all of this. But apparently Gaston was more commercially minded, and realised that times were changing. And so you couldn't just make, grand court dresses. You had to make things to be worn on the omnibus.
So is that a new, did you say biography? Or?
Oh, no, it's his autobiography that came out in, when is it, 31 originally, and the V&A, the V&A does...
Oh yeah, they republished, yeah.
Yeah, so it's one they've republished.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting. I mean, I read it years ago, and then I've read like bits of it when I've wanted to refer to things, but it's fun to actually sit and read the whole thing again.
Well, you must tell me more when you've read the whole thing.
Oh, I will. I'll read out chunks to you.
So, where are we at now? Have we come to a conclusion?
That it's everyday dress is multiple and complex and potentially hybrid. That it's been written about in numerous ways, but we need to recognise it. That cultural theories of everyday are very interesting. That you are an obstacle and that we like fried potatoes.
Okay.
That's my summary.
Very good. Thank you very much. I couldn't have done it.
You're really welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
And now I'm going to go in and continue to try and find my everyday dark brown perfect t-shirt.
Okay. Yeah, let me know, as I said.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
All right.
Speak to you next week then.
Bye.
Bye.